Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we dig into sources to pull out the key ideas for you, quickly and hopefully thoughtfully.
And today we're looking at Virtue and Reality by Ajahn Kalyāno. He's a Buddhist forest monk.
Right, so it's a deep exploration from a renunciant's viewpoint, connecting our ethics with how reality actually is.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, I think, is that it's rooted in his own practice. He's got this background in philosophy, psychology, even medical science.
So it's not just theory then.
Not at all. The idea is really to get you, the listener, to think about it, to explore it through your own experience,
Yeah.
not just taking someone else's word for it.
Okay, let's unpack this. One thing that jumped out at me straight away is the order he presents things in. Usually you hear virtue, concentration, then wisdom, sila, samadhi, panya.
Hmm.
But he goes virtue, wisdom, then concentration. Why put wisdom up front like that?
Well, that's a key point. The book suggests that wisdom, that kind of clear insight, should guide our ethics right from the beginning.
Ah, so it sets the direction.
Exactly. It's the lens for understanding and practicing virtue, even before you get deep into meditation, into samadhi.
And there's a dedication to supporters too, which feels, I don't know, quite grounded.
It does. It feels like it comes from real life, from a community. And he says himself, his main goal is to connect with your personal experience.
An invitation to check it out for yourself, basically, not just rely on scripture.
Precisely.
So the first big idea is spiritual aesthetics. Sounds a bit, fancy maybe? What's that about?
Yeah. Think of it like a deliberate way of seeing things, appreciating the world. A practice focused on, as the book puts it, looking for the goal.
Okay, so not just liking nice statues. How does this looking work?
Well, a big part is how we experience bodies, our own, other people's. Ajahn Kalyāno says we see them as feelings, raw sensations, but also as mental images.
Right, the idea we have in our head.
Yeah. And mindfulness practice is about bringing those two together, aligning the mental picture with the actual felt sense.
And that leads to empathy.
Profound empathy, potentially. It's like bridging the gap between yourself and others by having this unified perception of the body. That's a key insight there.
Interesting. And then these body beautiful aesthetics he talks about. Is that about having a perfect spiritual body or something?
No, not in the usual sense. It's more about useful ways to perceive, like the caring aesthetic, seeing the body as something to nurture,
Okay.
or the spacious body aesthetic, feeling it as open, not rigidly defined. And then heaven on earth, seeing the potential for goodness, for awakening, right here in our physical form.
So they're like lenses to cultivate compassion and detachment.
Exactly. Practical ways to relate differently to our bodies and others.
That spaciousness idea seems important. He links space and light with goodness, the spiritual, and contrasts it with darkness, evil. That feels very primal somehow.
It really does tap into something deep, doesn't it? The inner darkness, he suggests, is our turmoil, our attachments, aversions.
And virtue is turning towards the light.
Kind of, yeah. Cultivating self-discipline, but one based on kindness and wisdom.
Then we get fairy tale samadhi. Great name. But it sounds intense, letting go of your organs, your sense of self.
It is intense, but the imagery is key. It's about using things like the breath, or a sense of inner space or light, using them as anchors
Anchors for what?
to sort of loosen our grip on the body, our identification with it, its parts, letting go of those inner demons, not literally, but the I and mine we project onto our lungs or whatever.
Until emptiness shines through.
Right. A spacious awareness. And it's not nothingness. It's presented as a deep meditative state. So the insight is using imagination to loosen that physical identification.
Wow. Lungs as obstacles.
Hmm.
Powerful stuff. Then there's the riddle of the real fairy tale. The monk just sits, does nothing.
Yeah.
Is the point that our busy lives are the unreal fairy tale?
That's exactly it. The real fairy tale in the riddle is just a mirror of our ordinary, deluded mind, always busy, always seeking something outside.
Whereas the monk's stillness,
Yeah.
like maybe our own quiet moments.
Holds the potential for something more real to emerge. Inner peace, freedom. A step towards liberation, maybe. It's like, stop chasing illusions, just be present.
The magic is in the stillness, not the quest.
Okay.
And the beautiful princess, disgusted by her body, but sees inner light, a celestial palace.
Yeah, her disgust points to that potential disillusionment with the messy, impermanent physical side of things.
But the inner light, the palace.
That's the potential within the mind, the heart, to go beyond those limits, to see past the surface to something deeper, more radiant. seeing the light that shines through, as he puts it. True beauty isn't just skin deep, basically.
Okay, so that's the aesthetic foundation. How does this then connect to everyday ethics? He uses sexual morality as an example.
Right. This is where it gets very practical. He argues that our aesthetics, how we perceive beauty, goodness, what we desire, they directly shape our morality, our intentions, and ultimately that leads to the vital principle of informed consent.
So how we see affects what we think is right. That makes sense. He mentions perceptions aren't fixed, like the Thai view of a gay man.
Exactly. Culture, personal views, they shape perception hugely. And mindfulness lets us see that, maybe even redirect it consciously.
So in terms of sexual ethics, if you only see someone as a sex object,
Then your perception is narrow, potentially lacking empathy, and can lead to harmful actions.
but a fuller aesthetic, cultivated through mindfulness, considers the whole person. Feelings, well-being, morals.
Precisely. And the teaching suggests that with practice, perception itself can become more fulfilling than raw desire. Spiritual pleasures can naturally start to outweigh purely sensual ones.
Like a kid losing interest in old toys.
Yeah, that's the analogy he uses. It's about finding deeper, more lasting engagement.
Which brings us back to fully informed consent.
And here it's more than just a legal thing. It comes from really seeing the other person mindfully, understanding the situation fully. It becomes the ultimate controller, the veto on actions that could cause harm or disrespect.
The examples he gives are quite something. The husband letting his wife have an affair to avoid worse suffering. Or a fair disclosure leading to forgiveness.
They're challenging, aren't they? And the Swedish doctor, or the donkey and chicken ones, they really make you think about intention versus outcome.
And the complexity of consent when real understanding and potential harm are involved.
Absolutely. It boils down to whether both people can genuinely respect themselves and each other in the interaction.
Moving on then to the natural foundation of morality. What's the Buddhist take on where ethics actually come from?
Well, the basic idea is that clinging to sensuality binds us to suffering, to dukkha. Renunciation, letting go of that clinging, leads to freedom.
So morality isn't just rules from on high.
No, it's not seen as just top-down.
Yeah.
It arises naturally bottom-up from wanting freedom from suffering. It's cultivated through practice and developing right view.
And right view isn't just intellectual belief.
Definitely not. It's seeing, really seeing, how interconnected everything is. That naturally grows a moral conscience, shifts your values away from just material stuff towards human and spiritual well-being.
So virtue becomes about letting go of desires, letting go of the world in a way, transforming that relationship.
Yeah, fundamentally transforming it.
He brings in dependent origination briefly. How does that connect? For listeners maybe not familiar, what's the gist?
Dependent origination is that core teaching about how everything arises because of other things, in a cycle. It explains how suffering arises, how things are connected.
So practicing virtue.
Practicing virtue, sila, creates a kind of good space in the mind. And that has positive ripple effects through that whole cycle, leading away from suffering. It shows why our ethical choices matter so much.
Okay. So by letting go of desires, we start seeing things just as mind objects in a spacious awareness, relating through wisdom, not craving.
Exactly. And this bottom-up morality leads to a universal principle, seeing the shared humanity, avoiding objectification, whether from desire or hatred.
And for an enlightened person, an arahant, this morality is just natural, effortless, because there's no worldly desire.
Right. But it's not passive. It's not inaction.
He also distinguishes spiritual feelings from mundane ones. How do they guide us differently?
Spiritual feelings like detachment, compassion, equanimity. They're qualitatively different from grasping, anger, fear. They open the heart, guide you towards letting go, towards benefiting others, not just driven by selfish wants.
And what would this enlightened society look like then?
It'd be made up of people on the path, helping each other, content with little, seeing the body as not self. But crucially, they wouldn't force their views. They'd understand everyone has to see for themselves while still offering support and kindness.
Then the deep dive shifts into ultimate and conventional reality. This can get a bit tricky.
It can feel abstract, yeah. Ajahn Kalyāno tackles how these two levels of reality often get blurred. He even uses quotes from Heraclitus.
About desire.
Yeah, making us question if desire itself is the issue, or if it's more about greed, excessive craving. And he also points out the intrinsic motivation behind the spiritual path itself.
He uses that image of two sheaves of reeds leaning on each other, for the two realities being separate but dependent.
It's a great image, isn't it? They're distinct everyday reality and ultimate reality. But in our normal perception, they rely on each other. Through practice, like samadhi, the mind gains some independence from the senses. That presence is often called sita in the Thai forest tradition.
Like a core awareness.
Kind of, yeah. An awareness that becomes less dependent on sensory input through training.
But the goal isn't to just cut the connection entirely.
No, it's more about letting go of our attachment to form, especially the body, and realizing the spacious nature of reality, of mind itself. It's a shift in focus, releasing that deep grip.
He mentions Plato, too. Plato's good as the ultimate reality dispensing light and reason. How does that compare?
Well, Buddhism doesn't really have that personified good, but it sees ultimate reality as the potential source of goodness, wisdom. But in the conventional world, power is often tied to desire, or the skillful lack of it.
So enlightened beings influence through wisdom, not force.
Exactly. Because they're free from ego-driven desire. When ultimate truth enters the world through such beings, suffering lessens, and they naturally set ethical boundaries by example.
And he stresses that seeing is believing, wisdom comes first, then comes the shift in values and morality.
Absolutely critical. Real change comes from direct understanding, from wisdom, not just blind faith or following rules.
Then we get into mind over matter and the deathless. This really feels like the core metaphysical stuff.
It is. The relationship between mind and body is key here, determining which reality we mostly live in. Detachment from physical feeling, he says, weakens the tether between the two.
Making the body feel unreal.
Somewhat unreal, yeah. Entering a more detached awareness. There's that poem, Mind Over Matter, about the heart's vastness, its freedom from limits.
Right, that was beautiful. He also touches on things like heaven, ghosts, suggesting keeping an open mind.
Yeah, just being open to possibilities beyond the strictly material can broaden our view of reality.
How does the Buddhist idea of spirit stack up against the scientific view of consciousness just being brain activity?
Well, science often sees consciousness as emerging from the brain, dependent on it. Buddhism suggests an enlightened mind can achieve a stability and independence from the conditioned physical world. Yeah. An exception to the rule, you might say.
He even talks about using God to describe ultimate reality, not a creator, but a knowing God.
It's an interesting framing. Not a separate being, but the fundamental awareness that arises in the knowing between mind and world.
Knowing creates being.
In a sense. And the path is about becoming the one who knows the unborn, unconditioned, deathless reality beyond suffering.
But not eternalism in the usual sense.
Right, because the deathless was never born, so it can't die. It's outside that whole concept.
He contrasts focusing outside on objects with working inwardly on ill will, and then brings in the cloud of unknowing. Why that text?
It highlights the pitfalls of turning inward the wrong way, getting stuck on mental images, a kind of death of reason. True wisdom, like in Buddhism, transcends that. It's about letting go of the tangible, something, for the intangible, nothing, understood by the inner mind, emptying the mind to see truth.
Okay. Then, different kinds of knowing and the meaning of life. He lists different types: intrinsic, extrinsic, perceptual, consciousness itself, and transcendent knowing, knowing the Dhamma.
It just shows the different ways we grasp truth. The transcendent knowing, realizing the Dhamma directly, that's the deepest, most liberating kind.
And he flips that question, finding meaning in life, to life in meaning. What's that about?
It's a big shift. Instead of looking outside for meaning, recognize that meaning is inherent in reality's principles, especially impermanence.
How does impermanence give meaning?
By understanding it deeply, accepting it, you can use it as a tool to cut away the impermanent, illusory stuff in your own mind and glimpse the permanent, the unconditioned.
So direct experience, mindfulness, is true life.
That's what he suggests. Being truly aware is being truly alive. Lack of awareness is like being already dead, spiritually speaking. Creating a self is living divorced from reality.
And virtue helps here.
Virtue empties the mind, makes space for that direct experience, that realization of Dhamma. And this ultimate meaning, he says, can exist beyond the senses, brain, body, maybe even beyond death.
Exactly. The deepest meaning leads to true life, liberated consciousness, not tied down by our physical limits.
Then the book gets very practical with meditation practice and developing body awareness, where the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely. Meditation, especially developing body awareness, Sadi, is the vehicle. It involves deliberately creating an inner image of the body.
How?
By paying attention to neutral sensations, movement, posture, bones, the belly, things like that, just noticing.
And you compare this inner image to the outer one, the one we usually carry around.
Yeah, as a way to loosen desires and attachments tied to the physical form, ours and others. He gives those vivid examples.
The bird cage ribs,
Yeah.
chocolate factory digestive system. Exactly. They're meant to create a different, more objective perception, one not automatically colored by liking or disliking. It shows how fluid the mind-body link is.
And this ties into the 4 foundations of mindfulness.
It does. Body awareness, body image, feeling awareness, affect development, mind state awareness, citta, the spirit emerging, and awareness of mental objects or dhammas, including your intention.
So integrating these leads to liberation.
Yes, gradually shifting identification away from the physical body image towards the mental schema, getting perspective, letting go of that rigid sense of this is me, but not rejecting the body, finding another way to see it.
He also mentions formless realms carried by the truth of the formless, back to realities beyond the physical.
Right, just like the physical world has its nature, these formless states have their own truth, existing within reality, but not bound by matter.
The final section loops back to samadhi, wisdom, and the deathless. He defines samadhi as the mind collected, passive almost.
A stable, passive state of citta, yeah. And wisdom is dynamic samadhi, opening from the heart. Not just intellect, but intuitive knowing from a calm, open mind.
And that phrase again, never born, never dies, connecting it to science.
Right. Science confirms everything born must die. But it hasn't and can't disprove something that was never born.
He sees the brain as just another sense organ and warns about getting lost just focusing inward on thoughts.
Yeah, it can lead to confusion sometimes. Spirituality aims to empty the mind of distortions, to see clearly, to let go.
So in samadhi, withdrawing from the 6 senses
Lets you access experience without the usual sensory contact. The mind stays detached, just knowing. Eventually, that sense of a separate self dissolves. You rest in non-dual awareness.
an epistemological shift,
Yeah,
leading to freedom from the body.
and other forms of limited existence. It's a profound shift in how you know reality.
And this freedom is different from, say, existentialist freedom.
Very different. Existentialism often talks about freedom within suffering. This is freedom from suffering entirely, realizing the deathless state, the amata Dhamma.
Transcending the cycle completely.
Exactly. And true contemplation and meditation work together. They turn even negative experiences into fuel for liberation.
Reaching the deathless through both wisdom, panya, and meditative absorption, shana, a timeless state.
Right. Samadhi gets you calm and stable. Wisdom sees the impermanence, suffering, not self. But even samadhi needs wisdom, needs contemplation, comparing states, re-examining attachments like the body to go deeper and remain stable.
A clear, stable perception leads to a clear, stable state. And then this idea of a purely mental sphere, pure Dhamma, parallel to the physical universe.
It's a fascinating concept, isn't it? Suggests consciousness might have an existence independent of the physical reality we usually perceive.
So the expanded conclusion ties it all together. True meaning is life and its source.
And the highest meaning, the truest life, comes from Dhamma practice. From that direct, mindful experience of reality, that is true life.
Contrasted with unawareness, spiritual death, or creating a fixed self, which is divorced from reality.
And virtue, tied to feeling and intention, is the vehicle. It empties the mind for that direct experience. And again, that meaning can arise independently of the senses, brain, body, potentially beyond death.
Experiencing the body in the mind, not the other way around. And that final poem, Blood is Made in Bones.
Yeah, prompting us to look for the deeper truth beneath the physical surface. True meaning is true life. True consciousness is liberated consciousness.
So, wrapping up this deep dive into Ajahn Kalyāno's virtue and reality, wow, we've covered a lot. The link between ethics and reality, spiritual aesthetics shaping morals.
The natural basis of morality, ultimate versus conventional truth, mind over matter, the deathless.
The nature of consciousness and how meditation and wisdom lead towards liberation.
And the key thing is, it's presented not just as philosophy, but as a practical path, a way to really transform your inner world and how you relate to everything. A mindful, wise way to live virtuously.
Absolutely. We really hope this exploration gives you, the listener, a useful framework, something to reflect on in your own life. It definitely goes beyond just a surface look at these ideas.
It really does raise some big questions for all of us, doesn't it? Maybe you can sit with this.
Yeah.
What does real life actually mean to you? Is it just this physical existence, what your senses tell you?
Or is there maybe a deeper knowing, a potential for meaning, for freedom that goes beyond the body, beyond the everyday world?
Yeah. That feels like a question worth spending some time with.